All praise to the Most High Yahawashi Hamashayach. All praises to him. Let's touch on the topic that a lot of people have trouble understanding. Many people, when they hear that the Negroes are the Jews, when they hear that the Native Americans or the Indigenous Indian are the Jews, they have a problem with that. So we're going to go back a little bit further. We're going to touch on some of their progenitors and find out who they were. Let's see if they match up with those who they don't want to call the Jews. We're going to start off with Noah's descendants, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. First and foremost, we're going to go into the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, and we're going to start with Ham, just to bring more proof that the children of Israel are indeed of a darker hue of color. Darker than the Arabs, because people love to say, oh, they're Middle Eastern Jews. No, darker than the Arabs, darker than Ishmael. These are Jews, the true Jews that the Bible speaks of. We're going to start off with the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, and he's going to break down a simple term of Ham. So let's get into it. This is coming from the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. And I want to talk about the Chaldeans today, but let's start off with Ham, because we need to find out who these Negroes are. It says Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitors of the dark races, not the Negroes. So who are the Negroes? And we ventured through this many a times, but we're going to take another angle. It says, but the Egyptians, they are Ham. The Ethiopians, they are Ham. Libyans and the Canaanites, all Ham. But the Negroes are not Ham. His indecency, when his father lay drunken, brought a curse upon Canaan. So these 4 sons of Ham, Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites, are the progenitors of the Africans. All right? But it says not the Negroes. So the Negroes have a specific origin. Okay? So let's go to Chaldea. This is Chaldea. This is what we're going to be talking about. So where did they come out of? If they didn't come out of those 4 sons. Chaldea. As you remember, Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So Chaldea, or Chaldea, the country of which Babylon was the capital, and which conquered Judah and carried its inhabitants into captivity. So this was a place in Babylon. Chaldean, coming from Chaldea. So it doesn't give you much understanding of who these Chaldeans are. Do it. Interesting. Let's move on. This is coming from the book of Apocalypse, Volume 2 by Godfrey Higgins. The first volume of this work was finished in June 1883. All right, this is page 364. Let's read where I highlighted it. This is concerning the Chaldees, on who they are. In consequence of the prejudice, for it is really prejudice, against the Negro, or I ought rather to say against the possibility of a Negro, being learned and scientific, arising from an acquaintance with the present Negro character, I admit with great difficulty the theory of all the early astronomical knowledge of the Chaldees having been acquired or invented by his race, and that the Chaldees were originally Negroes. So the Chaldees were Negroes. So if Abraham dwelt with the Chaldees, then most likely he was just like them and looked just like the Negroes, and possibly was a Negro. So Ham had 4 sons. The Negroes weren't one of them. But here we have the Chaldees, and this scholar is saying that the Chaldees were Negroes. Let's go over here. This is page 274. Let's start where I highlighted it here. It says, it cannot be denied that the language of the Chaldees of the Jews and of Job, that is Arabians, were most closely connected dialects of one language. The Arabic of Job passes in the Israelite or Jewish canon for Hebrew. Parkhurst's lexicon serves at once for the Hebrew, the Chaldee, and the Arabic of Job. Now all the nomadic tribes of Africa and Asia have a language called Arabic. This is nowadays. And these tribes, from the peculiarity of their habits of life, have probably never had a foreign language imposed upon them. A fact which can be stated of scarcely any other nation. So all of these nations did not speak European. They all had a possibly Arabic or Hebraic type language. The interesting thing, if we go to the Bible and we look at Genesis chapter 11 and verse 16, it talks about Eber, who's the father of the Hebrews. And Eber, or Ibar, lived 34 years and begot Peleg. And Eber lived after he begot Peleg 430 years and begot sons and daughters. So Eber was the father of the Hebrews. Let's drop down to 28. It says, and Haran died before his father, Terah, which was Abraham's father, in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. So now we know that those were Hebrews. And Terah, in verse 31, and Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son's Abraham's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, another black nation. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. So the Negroes went and dwelt with the Hamites in Canaan. See that? Because Judith, in the book of Judith, the Chaldeans are also mentioned. And we're going to go to Judith chapter 4. Judith chapter 4 verse 1. Now the children of Israel that dwelt in Judea heard all that Holofernes, the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyrians, had done to the nations, and after what manner he had spoiled all their temples, and brought them to naught. Therefore they were exceedingly afraid of him, and were troubled for Jerusalem, and for the temple of the Most High, their power. For they were newly returned from the captivity, and all the people of Judea were lately gathered together, and the vessels and the altar and the house were sanctified after the profanation. So I just want to paint a picture with the children of Israel, what's going on. This is Babylon. They were coming up against the children of Israel. And as you can see, it was Holofernes, who was the chief captain. So let's drop down to Judith chapter 5. And let's go to verse 6. Judith chapter 5, verse 6. It reads, this people are descended of the Chaldeans. Let's go to verse 5. Then said Achior, the captain of all the sons of Ammon, let my power now hear a word from the mouth of thy servant, and I will declare unto thee the truth concerning this people, which dwelleth near thee, and inhabiteth the hill countries. And there shall no lie come out of the mouth of thy servant. Verse 6, this people are descended of the Chaldeans. So it's telling you plainly here that these people, the children of Israel, were descended out of the Chaldeans, as they sojourned heretofore in Mesopotamia, because they would not follow the gods of their fathers, which were in the land of Chaldea. For they left the way of their ancestors, and worshiped the power of heaven, the power whom they knew. So they cast them out from the face of their gods, or their powers. And they fled into Mesopotamia, and sojourned there many days. Now they call Mesopotamia the Middle East. It was never called the Middle East. Here it says it was called Mesopotamia. Then their power commanded them to depart from the place where they sojourned, and to go into the land of Canaan, where they dwelt, and were increased with gold and silver, and with very much cattle. So they went from one dark nation to another dark nation. They left Shem and went to Ham. And Shem and Ham were dark nations, right? And Mesopotamia was in East Africa. That's where it was. I'll read the next verse. But when a famine covered all the land of Canaan, they went down into Egypt and sojourned there, while they were nourished, and became there a great multitude, so that one could not number their nation. See that? Let me show you real quick that these two nations were a dark nation. The name of this book is The Image of the Black in Jewish Culture, A History of the Other, by Abraham Malamed. And it was first published in 2003. First published in 2003. So we're going to go to this book. This is page 89, and we're going to go up. And let's listen to this midrash. It reads, let's start here. This is concerning Ham and Shem, that they were both black. And Japheth was brown, but it's going to say something different. But let's read. It reads, the last example I know of appears in Perky de Rabbi Eleazar 24, a very late midrash from the 8th or 9th century, which may already contain Islamic influences. At first reading, it seems surprisingly different from the others. It reads, he blessed Noah and his sons, as it is said, and the Most High granted them their gifts, and bequeathed the entire world to them. He blessed Shem and his sons, black, Shahorim, and comely, which we know it means handsome, and granted them the entire cultivated world. He blessed Ham and his sons, black, Shahorim, as the raven, and granted them the coast of the sea. He blessed Japheth and his sons, all of them white, Levanium, which was really like a light brown. They weren't white. There was nothing that was white. And handsome, and granted them desert and fields. Rabbi Akiva says that they cast off the yoke of heaven, and made Nimrod, slave son of a slave, king over them, so that the sons of Ham are slaves, and woe to the land that is ruled by a slave. So it's telling you that Shem was what? Gives you his complexion, Shahorim. This text surprises for several reasons. First, there is no mention of punishment, but rather a positive statement is made about a blessing given before. Ham, sin. Only the last sentences relates to the punishment of Ham's descendants. Secondly, both Shem's and Ham's descendants are described as what? Shahorim, black. Let's go to the next page. Shahorim, by contrast with Japheth's, who are white and handsome, Lebanon, Vayafin. Black skin is attributed not only to Ham's offspring, neither is it shown as negative nor as a punishment, but in the positive context of a blessing. Only slavery, entirely separated from skin color in this case, is later described as the punishment for the sin of Ham. This, and not skin color, separates Ham from all the others. This midrash follows the biblical source more closely than all the others, mentioning slavery as the sole punishment, while skin color is cited as a blessing rather than a curse. So this is coming from the midrash. Let's read one more section down below on page 90. Let's start where I highlighted it. I'll start at the top of the paragraph. It says, while the offspring of Shem and Ham have their dark skin in common, the adjective used to modify it is different in each case and highly significant. While Shem's children are black and comely, Ham's are black as the raven. So we went over Ham in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, so you should know who Ham's children are. The first obviously paraphrases the Song of Songs 1 and 5 and is a positive statement. The description of Ham's children, black as a raven, paraphrases the Song of Songs chapter 5 and 11, where it describes the beautiful black locks of the beloved. In its original context, is a positive statement. But we have seen how the image of the black raven grew negative in time when linked to the complexion in general rather than to hair color. This was a deceptive view among Midrash authors. When you look at the 9th and 10th century, things started to change because of the Ottoman Empire, and the thought began to change against those who were darker complexion. It says, hence, while the black sons of Shem are described in the context of fine appearance, the black sons of Ham are linked to the despised raven. The sons of Shem, who is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob came out of, it says the sons of Shem are comely, despite their complexion, while the sons of Ham are like the raven because of theirs. There is now a common denominator linking the black, comely sons of Shem with the handsome, white sons of Japheth. So, as you can see where they're going with this, but the point is, it tells you what Shem looked like and what Ham looked like. They're on point with that. So let's go to page 213 in this book, and let's go to the middle highlight version using pencil. It says, they found it hard to accept Shem as black. Who? The scholars of Europe. With the concomitant danger of blurring the difference between him and Ham. As a result, some versions tended to whiten Shem. Isn't that something? As early as the 13th century, this is during the Renaissance time, a manuscript described Shem as white. So why were they changing the original complexion of Shem from black or dark hue or a dark hue to white? Why? This is telling you right here, this author, this scholar is telling you, he's a rabbi, he's telling you that they purposely did this. And this is the new persuasion that came all over the world, that the Jews were not black, that they were not Negro. So the progenitors of the Jews were black. That means that they're still black, with some degradations of mixture involved with the Jews who are scattered to the four corners of the earth. Yeah, so let's go over. I got to read this part. I don't have enough light in here, but I'm going to read this paragraph where I got the purple highlight. It reads, Ben Israel's need to deny so energetically the anti-Semitic allegations that Jews have relatively dark skin, he's trying to hide that, a feature so easy to identify with the primitive natives, shows how strongly he feared just such an identification, perhaps also because of the increasing black and mulatto conversions in the Amsterdam Jewish communities, because they were finding out that it was their heritage. That's why they were converting. They were getting away from Christianity and converting to their original heritage. They were the real Jews, the black and mulattoes in Amsterdam, converting to their original heritage. So this scared the Jewish community in Amsterdam. While the medieval Jewish scholar agreed that the Jews were swarthy and tried to show that it indicated genetic and moral superiority, Manasseh ben Israel, so deeply rooted in the Western European culture of his own time, categorically denied such a possibility. Look at that. Don't want to face the facts or the truth. He had obviously psychological need and an interest in identifying the Jew as a person of true culture. Example, as a total European, which they were not, identifying with his designators in the majority Christian culture. He had to be more European than they, and to identify the Jew as the ultimate culture, European, hence white in every respect. So these people calling themselves Jewish weren't Jewish at all. They were Khazars, and they converted in the 9th century to being us, Jews. This book is called Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers. This book was published and copyrighted in 1952. Here's another resource on page 12 of Origin of Color Prejudice. This is from his research. He states, furthermore, we have no proof that the original 70 Jews who went to Egypt were white. According to their legends, they originated in Chaldea, and there is considerable evidence the inhabitants of that region in earliest times were Negroid. In fact, some writers said the Jews were an African people. Strabo said many of his time believed they were. Again, another resource stating that the Jews originally from Chaldea were Negroes. This is coming from the book The Nautical Magazine and Naval Chronicle for 1870, a journal of papers, maritime affairs. This is page 529. Let's go down to the highlighted version here. It reads, the Luengo family, the inhabitants of Luengo do not differ materially from those of the Gabon and Cape Lopez. It is probable that the Jewish type or Israelite type of character above mentioned forms a larger element of population here than it does on the Pongo coast. And this it was doubtless which led the Roman Catholic missionaries who labored here during the 16th and 17th centuries to the conclusion that they had found black Jews in Luengo. So the Roman Catholic missionaries apparently were able to penetrate into this part of Africa, and this is who they found, black Jews in Luengo. So they knew when they took us into captivity who they were getting. They were getting black Jews. This type of character, combined with the practice of circumcision, naturally enough led to this opinion, but this rite is nearly universal throughout the country, whilst this particular cast of countenance is only one out of a good many varieties that cannot be accounted for. Barbeau states, who's a famous journalist, he wrote many memoirs, that in the reign of Don John II, and about the close of the 15th century, this is before the Roman missionaries, large numbers of Jews were expelled from Portugal and taken to the coast of southern Guinea, that the island of St. Thomas, which is not more than 100 miles from the mainland, was populated by mulattoes descended from the Israelite exiles and Anglo women. So the men were the Israelite exiles. The Anglo women, from a journalist of Caucasian disposition, is talking about the women of Europe being Caucasian women. So these are Jews because we go from our father's seed. It is possible that the Israelite type of character noticed at the Gabon and Luengo may have originated from this source, but if so, it is unknown to the present inhabitants of the country, and it would have been somewhat singular if the Roman Catholic missionaries at Luengo had not detected this circumstance, instead of regarding them as a pure African family of Jews. So they were Jews. They were Jews before these Portuguese Jews came. They were already Jews there. So they met up with their own people in St. Thomas in Guinea. And they were alike, but they had different opinions. It's kind of like the Dominicans versus the Haitians, or the Dominicans versus the Americans. They come over here and they said they're not black or African Americans. They said that they're Dominicans. All right? That's what they say.
Stars. My grandmother came to this country in 1961. I am a proud child of immigrant parents with dreams and dignity and hardworking hands. And I am the first American of Dominican origin. To accept an Academy Award, and I know I will not be the last. I hope the fact that I'm getting an award for a role where I got to sing and speak in Spanish. My grandmother, if she were here, she would be so delighted. This is for my grandmother, Argentina CC. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
So let's see if the Dominicans were actually from Spain, if they were white or black. We're going to see who were the ones who fled to America. This is a book called Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers. This was published or copyrighted in 1952. 1952. One, two, three. Let's go to the third paragraph. It reads, Waits says, an interesting gradation of all shades down to the black is exhibited by the Jews. So it's the opposite way. It's exhibited from the blacks all the way down to so-called Caucasians. That's the right way to say it. Especially dark were the Jews of Spain and Portugal. The Portuguese Jews were very dark, says Pritchard. The Duchess de Abrantes, wife of Napoleon's ambassador to Portugal, said that the Jew, the Negro, the Portuguese could be seen in a single person. But in Spain and Portugal, there were Jews, and they were very dark. So dark were the Jews, especially of Portugal and southern Spain, that many whites thought all Jews were black or dark. So the sister doesn't realize that those who ended up on the island of Hispaniola, a lot of them came from Spain. They were black. They were black Jews. Paragraph. Let's read the last sentence. Many of the Jews who were banished from Portugal by John II, page 130, continued, by John II, settled in the West Indies. Where's the West Indies again? Oh, it's over here in the Americas. John Bigelow, who visited Jamaica in 1850, saw the descendants of these Jews and says they were Negroid. So that sister don't know her history. She don't know her history, that she is a Jew. This is a book called The Jews and the Moors. In where? In Spain. By Rabbi Josh Crosskop. This was published in 1887. Remember, John Bigelow said that he saw the descendants of the Jews in 1850. This book was published in 1887. Let's go to page 94. Let's read this paragraph, second paragraph. It reads, the Jews, now that we know that the Jews were dark or black in Portugal and Spain, the Jews knew what was wanted. They paid a large sum of money, and the laws remained inoperative till Ricardo's successor, Sispuru, ascended the throne. The king entered into a league with Empress Heraclius, with the pious determination of extirpating the dangerous race throughout the world. Who is that race? The Israelites, the Jews. So there's a new sheriff in town, and he's putting out new laws. It says, and so he issued a law which gave the Jews a year's time to decide whether they would confess Christ and be baptized. Baptized into what? Christianity. Roman Catholicism, rather. Not the ancient Hebraic so-called Christianity, or not so much keeping the law, statutes, commandments, but following a new way, which is not of their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it says, he gave them 1 year to decide whether they would confess Christ and be baptized, or be shaved and scourged, their property confiscated, and themselves forced to leave the country. So where did they leave? Those who had the opportunity to leave, where did they go? They went to Dominican. They went to Haiti. It's Hispaniola. That's where they fled. Some went to Africa, Angola, towards Libya, but some went to the Americas, as we had read, and nature knows no color line. This book is called Before the Mayflower, A History of Black America, 6th edition. This book was published in 1961. I'm going to page 34. I'm going to start with this area where it says New World. It says, and this is talking about the Spanish, the blacks in Spain. It is a point of paradoxical interest that descendants of the first black captives, black Christians, born in Spain and Portugal, these are the children of those who suffered at the hands of the Inquisition. These are their children. They became slaves under the Christians. Were with the first European explorers and settlers. Black explorers, servants, slaves, and freemen accompanied Spanish and Portuguese explorers in their expeditions in North and South America. See that? They were with Pizarro in Peru, Cortez in Mexico, and Mendez in Florida. 30 blacks were with Balboa when he discovered the Pacific Ocean. Typical of the early black explorers in America was Estevanico, who opened up New Mexico and Arizona for the Spaniards. Other blacks, W.E.B. Du Bois said, accompanied De Soto, and one of them stayed among the Indians in Alabama and became the first settler from the Old World. These people had Spanish names, these blacks. Let's drop down. An estimated 1 million of these slaves found their way to the land that became the United States of America. That's what we were talking about, and nature knows no color line. But the first black immigrants, Antony, Isabella, and the Jamestown group, were not slaves. See that? They had Spanish names on top of it. This is a fact of critical importance of the history of black America. They came, these first blacks, the same way that most of the first white immigrants came, under duress and pressure. The Jews, the black Jews, were under duress and pressure. A lot of them escaped. Some of them were kidnapped. Some of them went into slavery. Some were killed due to the Inquisition. It says here, many were sold as the first blacks were sold by the captains of ships. Some were kidnapped on the streets of London and Bristol as the first blacks were kidnapped in the village of Africa. So you had Israelites in London and Bristol getting picked up and put on slave ships, who were Jews. Look, a large proportion of the first generation of African Americans entered America with Spanish names. For reasons that are not readily apparent, many black males were called Antonio, a name that quickly became Antony or Anthony. Other popular names of the period included Micaela, Cosexlo, which was in Haiti, Mingo, Pedro, Francisco, Jabina, Maria, Huertello, Tomora, Angola, and Tony Congo, that was in Puerto Rico. Shortly after their arrival in America, many blacks discarded African and Spanish names and adopted English titles. So it's telling you right there that a lot of people came from Spain who became slaves. They were children of the Jews, and they were succumbed to slavery as children who had to grow up being Christian, who forgot the heritage of their parents. Make sense? Makes sense. Let's jump up to page 37. I'm going to say this real quick. Let's drop down to the highlighted version. Now, quite a few, as we have noted, came from England, where blacks had lived since the middle of the 16th century. Many came from Spain, Portugal, and the West Indies, which we have spoke of. Significantly, many were Christians, baptized either in Spain or Portugal or on the high seas. Baptized how?
And I am the first American of Dominican origin.
And I am the first American of Dominican origin
To accept an Academy Award, and I know I will not be the last.
So as you can see, there were black Jews in Africa. This book is called Tribute for the Negro by Wilson Armistead, 1848. This is page 64. It says here, the Jews, however slightly their features may have assimilated to those of other nations amongst whom they are scattered, from the causes already stated, certainly form a very striking example as regards the uncertainty of perpetuity in color. Descended from one stock and prohibited by the most sacred institutions from intermarrying with the people of other nations, and yet dispersed according to the divine prediction into every country on the globe. This one people is marked with the colors of all: fair in Britain and Germany, brown in France and in Turkey, swarthy, which is black, in Portugal and in Spain, olive in Syria and in Chaldea. Olive, there's only two types of olives, green and black. So this is also a black people in Syria and in Chaldea. Another word for Chaldea is in Isaiah 11:11. It says from the land of Shinar. Shinar is also Chaldea. Within Chaldea, you had cities within Chaldea, like Erech. That was a city within Chaldea. Nimrod actually built that city. It says tawny or copper color in Arabia. Like your Native Americans have that copper color or that tawny color. And in Egypt, what they are, black at Congo in Africa. So in Africa, the Israelites are black. In other parts of the world, Israelites are black. Swarthy is black. Brown is black. Fair is even black. He's a light skin, looking like mulattoes in Britain and Germany. Right? Olive is black. So this should tell you something right here, that the Israelites are scattered abroad and they are of Negro stock. This is page 65. We're going to go to the highlighted pencil version. It says, a remarkable fact in the history of Luango. We spoke about Luango earlier. In the Empire of Congo is that the country, according to a statement which was fully credited by Oldendorp himself, a writer of most correct judgment and of impeachable veracity, contains many Jews settled in it. Let's flip the page to 66. It reads, who retain their religious rights and the distinct habits which keep them isolated from other nations, though thus separate from the African population. They are black and resemble the other Negroes in every respect as to physical character. That's why I said with the Dominican Republic, a lot of them came from Spain. Their ancestors were Jews in Spain, and they don't even realize it. Talking about the Dominican, that name Dominican means dog, or Domingo, it means dog. So why would you want to call yourself Dominican? It is probably in allusion to this case that Pennington in his textbook says the descendants of the colony of Jews originally from Judea settled on the coast of Africa are black. So there were kingdoms in Africa before the Portuguese Jews came. So they came and mingled and dwelt amongst the Jews who were already settled in Africa. M. Rosa declares that there are many negresses. She called herself a negrito, right? The sister that won the Oscar. There are many negresses in the Algerine country, whether they have doubtless been brought from the interior of Sudan, and very probably from Hassa, who are of a jet black color, but with truly Roman countenances. What is that, Roman countenances? They speak and they act like Romans. Remember, we were in captivity under the Romans. We took that whole demeanor with us into Africa. This book is called Pseudodoxia epidemica. Pseudodoxia epidemica. This is written by Sir Thomas Browne. And I believe this book was written in 1650. The first edition, it appears to be, it says here, the first edition is in Portfolio with the following title page, Pseudopixia Epidemica. It says 1646, and it's telling us what Shem looked like. Let's go to page 189, and I'm going to try to shoot it from an aerial point like I am now. There have existed various opinions, and we're going to start here. It reads, there have existed various opinions as to the original complexion of mankind. Not only have the Negroes deemed themselves the fairer, describing the devil and all terrible objects as being white. See that? But they have contended that our first progenitor was like themselves, black. Let's go here. Let's go to the next highlighted area. Dr. Pritchard has also endeavored to show that all men were originally Negroes. Blumenbach, on the other hand, supposed the original to have been Caucasian. The influence of climate has been the most generally assigned cause of the blackness of Negroes, which is false, by some of the greatest naturalists, both in ancient and modern times. So they're trying to change the narrative. That's not true. It's just not true. Let's go to page 92. Children naturally speak Hebrew. And this is going to go more into the Chaldeans and the language of the Hebrews. Let's see if the Chaldeans are mentioned together with the Hebrews here. It says, he subsequently gives the following reasons for attributing to the usually called Semitic languages, namely Hebrew, Chaldee, Syriac or Syriac, Arabic, and Ethiop of Abyssinia, all within the east of Africa. A Mizrite and therefore Hamitic origin. When the Almighty was pleased to call Abraham from his native country, the land of the Arphaxidites or Chaldees, first into the country of Aram, and afterward into that of Canaan, one of two things must necessarily have had placed: either that the inhabitants of these latter countries spoke the same languages as himself, or else that he acquired the knowledge of the foreign tongues spoken by these people during his residence in the countries in which they were vernacular. That they, let's go here, this is page 93, that they all made use of the same language cannot be imagined, even if it be assumed that the descendants of Arphaxad, Abraham's ancestor, and the Aramites, in whose territories Terah and his family first took up their residence, which was Abraham's father, spoke the same language, or at the furthest merely dialects of the same original Shemitish tongue. We cannot suppose that this language would have resembled those which were spoken by the Hamitic, Canaanites, and the Philistines, in whose countries Abraham afterwards sojourned. So these are all Hamitic nations: Ham, Canaan, Philistines. The Philistines came out of the Egyptians, cousins of the Egyptians. Ham is the progenitor of Canaan and the Philistines, or the Egyptians, in whose countries Abraham afterwards sojourned. Unless we at the same time contend that the confusion of tongues at Babel was practically inoperative. A conclusion, I apprehend, in which we should be directly opposed to the express words of Scriptures. Genesis 9, 1-9. So it's telling you that the Hebraic tongue came out of the same lineage of our Foxod, of the Chaldeans, and the Syrian. They were all the same. They were Semitic languages. The Arabics also spoke it, and parts of the Ethiopic people spoke it, of Abyssinia, which was the ancient language called Ge'ez. 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 That was also a Semitic language.
So, listen, we've done a lot on this topic. We've spoken to the guys in Dimona, and I think there is a lot of historical evidence to the possibility that many African Americans today are descendants of Jews from the Holy Land, even you know, from the First Temple, Second Temple, and whatnot. What do you have to say about now the growing interest in, you know, African Americans trying to identify with Israel in one way or another, just overall in the macro spiritual component of it, as myself, a fellow student of Kabbalah?
Oh, wow. So, you know, I think it's an amazing opportunity. And I think this is an opportunity where we can, you know, I think during the 60s, during the Martin Luther King era, there was a very close relationship between Jews and African Americans. And I think, you know, over time, it's been somewhat of a separation. And so I think now, you know, God has created a context where we could re-talk together, and not just from the standpoint of a political standpoint, but from a spiritual standpoint, and connecting the fact that there's many Igbo Jews that are in Nigeria, and many of those people were part of the transatlantic slave trade. And there's always been a tradition in African American culture that we're connected to the Bible and people of the Torah and these types of things. So I think it's a chance to reacclimate, you know, the times from before. And